my name's Rebecca.
And I'm Anna.
And we are beekeepers with CombCutters Live Bee Removal Service.
That's right. We're here to talk to you today about bees and all the ways that we live together, work together, and can learn from them.
Before we get started learning about the amazing world of bees, we want to talk a little bit about exactly who those bees are and where they fit into the wide world of pollination. So, as you all probably know, almost all the plants in the world rely on pollinators, or certain types of animals, to actually carry pollen from one flower to the other and help that flower reproduce, turn into a fruit or a seed, and actually start another plant. And we learn a lot about how bees are amazing pollinators, and that is true. But actually in the world, there's over 500,000 different species of pollinators. So there are wasps that pollinate, birds, bats, believe it or not, flies are really important pollinators. There's a fruit right here in Miami where we live that grows, it's ripe in the summertime, it's very abundant here. People love it, it's super delicious, and its #1 pollinator are flies. It's the mango, believe it or not. So if you like mangoes, you gotta love flies. Believe it or not, even mosquitoes pollinate sometimes, right? So all of those pollinators. So we're here to talk about bees and why bees are important and how they can contribute to our lives and how we can learn from them. But what we also have to remember is that all of those pollinators are super, super important, and it's actually really important to learn about as many of them as we can and to create spaces and create habitat that can support the lives of all of those pollinators as well, not just honeybees. When we're talking about honeybees, we have to get a little bit specific to understand who exactly these bees are that we're talking about. So I said that in the whole wide world, there's 500,000 or more species of pollinators. Well, believe it or not, in the whole wide world, there's over 20,000 species of bees, okay? So when we hear the word bee, we mostly think about that cute little fuzzy bee that makes all that honey, right? But actually, out of those 20,000 species of bees, that's just one of them. Of the 20,000 species of bees in the world, there's about 4,000 or so that are native to the United States, and here in Florida, they've found up to 315 different species of bees, which is pretty amazing. But out of all of those 20,000 species of bees, when we say the word bee, we're usually talking about one species, the Western Honeybee, and that is the one that makes all that honey that we love to eat and does a lot of work for pollination in big agricultural fields. But all of those other species of bees, all of the bees that are native to here, are actually just as important as the honeybee. Part of the reason why we don't learn as much about the other species of bees is because most of them are solitary bees. So we're going to learn in a little bit that Western honeybees are collective insects, community insects. They live in a giant community and they all work together to make that community function, right? But actually most types of bees in the world are solitary insects where there's just one bee that lives by herself. She digs a little burrow in the ground or in some wood or something like that, lays an egg, raises her babies, and then those babies emerge and they go do their thing. They lay their own eggs, but they don't live in a big colony, right? So it's harder for us to see them and harder for us to think about them. But again, they're all super, super important. So we want to make sure to emphasize that even though we're here to talk about Western honeybees, we know that all of those species of native bees are just as important, and that we want to create gardens and yards and wild spaces that can attract all of those different native pollinators, because we know that each one has a really important job to do in this world. All right, so we got this smoker going, which we're going to use to help keep the bees calm when we go open the hives. And we're going to get ready to go, and we'll take a closer look. go. All right, it is time to open up this hive. So as a beekeeper, our main job is to really do our best to care for and support these amazing creatures that we value and respect so much. So every couple of weeks we open up every beehive that we maintain and we go through it slowly, checking on the bees' health, looking for signs of pests, parasites, and diseases, looking for signs of overcrowding. And then if we see that something's amiss, we kind of take whatever actions are necessary to fix that problem and hopefully support this hive continuing to live as a healthy community. So I always start with a little bit of smoking the entrance just to give them a little heads up that we are opening up the hive, we're coming their way. The smoke kind of keeps them calm, maybe distracts them a little bit. A really cool thing about beekeeping is that for as long as there's been industrialized agriculture, people have been working with bees, and not much has changed in that amount of time. So smoker has been around for a really long time. It's a really simple machine. You build a fire inside of it, as you saw earlier, pump the bellows, and the smoke comes out. Western honeybees themselves have been around on this planet for at least 100 million years. They originated in Africa or Asia. There's a little bit of controversy about where exactly they first started, but scientists agree they either started in Africa or Asia, and then they migrated to Europe, and after that they were brought to the Americas by colonizers. So there are no honeybees that are native to the Americas at all. They were all brought here on ships with the colonizers when the colonizers came to the Americas. So it's really important for us to think about, even though we love Western honeybees, we rely on them for a lot of our food and our agriculture, we love the honey that they produce, it's really important for us to remember that they're not actually native here, right? So even though we want to take care of Western honeybees and support Western honeybees, it's important to think again about the native pollinators that we already talked about a little bit and how we can support them to thrive and survive right here in these ecosystems that they're from, where they work in conjunction with the native plants and the ecosystems around them. Let's see what we can find inside this hive. So inside every single hive of Western honeybees, there are 3 different types of bees. The 80,000 bees, and out of those 80,000 bees, there's only one queen, and she has, of course, a very important job. Her one and only job is to lay the eggs of the hive. So there she is again. So a lot of people think because we call her the queen bee, that she probably rules the hive, makes the decisions for the hive, things like that. Actually, it's the workers, and we're going to get more into this later, that communicate and make all the decisions for the hive and everything like that. The queen does have a super important job, laying the eggs. All day, every day, all she does is lay eggs. So she doesn't necessarily do other work, but without that, the hive would not survive. They say that every single day, a queen bee can lay up to 1,500 or 2,000 eggs. And then the third type of bee in the Western honeybee hive are called drones. And they're a little bit bigger than the worker bees. They're wider, they have bigger eyes, and those are the males. They don't do most of the work in the hive, but they do of course have a very important job. Their job is to mate with the queen. So the queen bee only mates once in her life. When she's freshly emerged as an adult bee, she goes on a mating flight. And when she goes on the mating flight, drones from all over the area, from different hives, can smell her going on that flight. They smell the pheromones that she's releasing. And they fly after her, and they all meet up in the air, and the drones mate with her. She might mate with anywhere from 10 to 20 drones in the air while she's flying. One and only job of the drone, besides waiting around for a queen to be ready to mate with, they really just lounge around the hive, eat food that the workers bring them, things like that. But of course, if we didn't have them, the queen wouldn't be able to mate, she wouldn't be able to lay eggs. So again, every single bee in the hive is super, super important. Here's a drone right here. So they're bigger, wider, they have those big eyes. They think that drones have such big eyes because their only job, again, is to mate with the queen when she's ready to mate. In order to successfully mate with the queen, they have to be able to see her, right? So they have really big eyes for spotting a queen flying really far away. So Western honeybees, like many other insects, butterflies and moths, go through what's called complete metamorphosis. That means that they go through different life stages where they look completely different. Their body changes completely versus humans, right? Where we change a lot in our lives, but we actually keep the same basic form as we grow, right? We just get kind of bigger and more developed. Bees go through the complete metamorphosis. They change completely with every stage of life. Stage of life for all Western honeybees is eggs, right? So the queen lays an egg. It looks like a tiny, tiny, tiny grain of rice, and it stands on its end, and she lays it in the far back of the cells. The really cool thing about the queen bee is that her abdomen is the exact length of the depth of each cell of honeycomb, so that she can put her abdomen into the cell and lay that egg as far back as possible, where it's nice and protected from everything. The eggs take about 3 days to hatch, and after they hatch, they turn into larvae. The larvae look like little tiny white worms. You can kind of see some in the back of these cells, curled up in there, right? And they start out really tiny, and they get a little bit bigger. For worker bees, they're in their larval form for about 6 days. For queen bees, it's a little bit shorter, 5 or 5.5 days, and for drones, it's a little bit longer. After they are larvae, they become pupa, right? So what's really cool about bees is that we know about how butterflies make chrysalises and moths make cocoons, right? But bees actually make cocoons as well. And I didn't know that for a long time, so it was cool for me to learn that. So when the bees are getting ready to pupate, they...
Start from when the bees...
Yeah.
Awesome.
So when the larvae are getting ready to pupate, they actually spin a cocoon inside of each one of these cells, And after they've spun that cocoon, other worker bees come and they cover the cocoon with a wax capping. So all of these covered up cells that we see right here, these are all bees that are pupating right now as we speak. Inside that cocoon, if we were able to insert a tiny camera in there, we would see a bee turning from a little white larvae. While we're looking through the hive, we're looking for a bunch of things. As I said, we're looking for any signs of pests, parasites, and diseases. And then we're looking for signs of overcrowding. If the bees are running out of room, what we're going to find is that they're taking actions to swarm or to split their hive. So when they get too crowded and they run out of room, what they actually do is raise a new queen, and half of the hive will leave with the old queen and half of the hive stays with the new queen. Some people wonder, like, okay, they raise a new queen. How could they possibly just raise a new queen? What makes a queen a queen? So it's really cool how they raise a new queen. What they do is, first, the worker bees note that they need a new queen for some reason. Either they are getting crowded and they're going to swarm, or the old queen is getting too old, not laying well enough, and they realize they need to replace her, or maybe something happened to the queen, an emergency situation, and they need to raise a new queen quickly because she's no longer alive, right? So what they do, the workers all communicate together and they identify a couple of eggs that they think are going to be really strong genetically and health-wise, and they decide that those eggs are the ones they're going to raise into queens. So as I said, the eggs take 3 days to hatch, and they hatch into larvae. When they're larvae, for the first 3 days of all bees' larval periods, drone, queen, and worker bees, they all get fed a product called royal jelly. It's this kind of like substance that humans think of as like a health elixir, and it's very expensive to buy it in the store. Well, what it really is, we say it's kind of like bee snot. It's like a white, sticky substance that they secrete from their heads, right? And it's actually the food that they feed all larvae for the first 3 days. After those 3 days, they switch to a different diet for worker larvae and drone larvae, and it's this stuff right here. All this stuff that is inside these cells is what we call bee bread. It's kind of like fermented pollen and nectar all packed together, and it's the main food for most of the larvae in the hive. So the worker and the drone larvae get switched to the diet of bee bread after the 3rd day in their larval period. But the eggs that they've decided they want to raise into queens, for those ones only, they don't switch the diet. They only feed them royal jelly for the entire larval period. And it's that change in diet that actually allows an egg to develop into a queen instead of a worker. So it's pretty cool. The workers and the queens all start out from the same exact eggs. Any worker egg could be raised into a queen if the bees decide to change the diet during the larval period. It's pretty amazing. So anytime you're working with bees, you want to move super, super slow. You want to show them the respect that they show us. They do so many amazing things for us. You want to not freak them out when we're working with them, right? So generally speaking, bees are defensive animals, not aggressive animals. That means that they only sting when they really feel like they need to do that to protect their hive, right? They don't sting for no reason. So, and of course, when a worker bee stings you, she dies. And so we know that they don't want to sting. They only sting if they absolutely have to because they're not trying to die. That means that if we move super slow, if we treat them with respect, if we're really intentional and careful with the way we work with them, they have no reason to sting us, right, for the most part. If we're super anxious and super nervous, they can sense that in us, and they also will become super anxious and super nervous, right? So we want to take a lot of deep breaths before we work with the bees and be nice and calm.
Wow, Rebecca, I loved all that stuff you were talking about with native pollinators and just how much we just really don't give them enough credit when it comes to how much they contribute to pollinating our fruits. And to think about how our own history mirror the migration of the Western Honeybee. That's super cool.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And just hearing you say that reminds me that just how important it is not only to support native pollinators, which we've been talking about, but also to think about the native peoples, the indigenous peoples that actually lived on this land originally, right? And the indigenous peoples that live here in South Florida still today. And just how important it is to support those communities, right? And to build healthy ecosystems of people where we're supporting native pollinators and native peoples, right?
That's so very true. I mean, their way of life is so in tandem with everything that's around them. The plants, the animals, everything. We might as well support their way of living and learn about their cultures to, to have a knowing of like where it is that we're living and playing and working. Where is that you guys live and work? Who are the first peoples of those lands?